So I have 9 pillars of holistic sexuality that I've come up with based on a 1981 version of it that is outdated. And the first one is sensuality. So my story is, and so the second thing is that, so you release yourself from the stereotypes. And the second thing is listen to other people's stories. Sometimes where you learn you aren't is a great way to learn where you are, and don't be afraid of the differences. And then sometimes hearing your story or something new can be an entry point. So I always look in sexuality, look for your guardrails and then look for your entry ramps into it. And so see if the story I'm about to share feels like a guardrail or an entry ramp to you. So when I started thinking about sensuality as a part of sexuality, a lot of times they're interchanged, but they're different. Sensuality is truly just how you relate to 5 senses. And not everyone has access to all 5 senses, and not everyone has the same access to the 5 senses. But once you start figuring out your relationship with all 5 senses, it makes a very big difference in 2 things. One is it creates a mind-body awareness. And that is a really key part as a underpinning for who you are as a sexual being, is having mind-body awareness. The second thing is that we all have relationships of yeses and nos to our senses, things that are like, oh, that's a yes, that's a yes, that's a yuck, that's a no for me. And when you become brave enough to say, this is a yes, this is a no for me, and are listening to how your body says that, it begins a skill set of agency that you grow into other places. And I haven't even talked about sex acts. Here I have been talking about sensuality this whole time, and that's usually the part that people are most afraid of or feel most comfortable, as they think I'm going to go straight to sex acts, what you're doing with your body and with whom you're doing it. And I was like, no, that takes a while for us to get to that. No, we're talking about other things first, and sensuality being one of them. And I love this story. So when I started hearing about sensuality, I thought, oh, well, that is for a woman who is in Bali, and she has long flowy hair, and she wears long flowy skirts, and she talks like this, and she has this, and I was like, and that is not me. That's not how I look. That's not how I talk. I mean, I could put that on. My hair is actually naturally curly, but I was like, but that's not me. So I'm not a sensual person, because I was equating a very narrow place of what sensuality meant in sexuality. I also used to act, and I was in an acting class, and we went around the class, and the coach asked us what would be the most scary scene that she could ask us to do. And I was the second person to go. And I was like, oh, having to seduce somebody. And the next person went and said, they kind of looked at me like, what? And they're like, murdering a child. And then the next person was like, incest. And it was like all these huge things. And I was the outlier. Like, why in the world would I have picked seduction as the worst scene for me to do? And so I knew, I was like, oh shit, like I'm gonna have to do this now. So she's like, Juliana, go over and seduce Price. And I couldn't do, I mean, I was awful, and I had no idea how to do it. And I was 30 at the time doing this, and had already been married and had a child. I had, in a lot of ways, thought I knew who I was as a sexual being. But what I discovered in that, even though it's in the context of acting, was that who I was as a sexual being was performative, and I didn't know how to get into the authentic part of who I was. And so when she came to me, she's like, you got to fix that. Like, just go ahead and fix it. And when I sat with that statement of you have to fix it, I was thinking, what is the it that I'm trying to fix? I knew there was something wrong, but I didn't understand what the combination of that was. So bringing that story to the story of what a sensual being is, I started wanting to know who I was. And I wanted to know who am I for who I am, not as performing for anybody else, not trying to be the right kind of anything. And I went back to that image of who I went to immediately as a sensual woman, like the right kind of sensual woman. And I thought, okay, good for her. I love her. Have friends just like that. And they are very wonderful in their own right. And I thought, so what's Juliana's brand of sensual? And I went on a mission, and I went into lots of yucks and yums. I went through all 5 of my senses. And I let myself have the permission to be like, no, yes, I don't know. maybe if I did this. And I just kept doing it. And it was a very brave endeavor. It was not an easy thing to do. I did it by myself. And then I learned to do it with other people, and I started teaching people how to do that. And I realized, oh, there's something to this, because it is something we all have in common. We all have our senses, and it's not this huge lift. I'm not trying to talk to you about this one sex act. I'm trying to say, what does your body do when it loves something, and what does your body do when it doesn't? And it gets to be very different. So that's the beginning.
That is so interesting, and the fact that we are talking about learning about it in acting class, that's my background as well, and I feel like I truly learned more about body awareness in acting class, and some of it was scary. What a really interesting story, and I love that that's what you share so openly, so thank you for being vulnerable with that. I do wanna mention the book real quick. It's coming out when, Juliana? When is it coming?
September 23rd.
Yeah, so, I mean, you got time. Are you gonna do pre-order on it?
Yes, yeah, we'll be
Exciting.
doing lots of like starting it out and telling
Definitely.
people about it too. Yeah.
Well, let's just mention that real quick. I'm going to mention the name of the book. I know there's a lot of stuff that you're doing, but since we've been talking around the book, it's called A New Position on Sex: A Guide to Greater Sexual Confidence, Pleasure, and Authenticity, coming out in September of 2025. And this is a really, I mean, I read a lot, and I have a lot of people on the show that have books, and I love reading fellow authors' books. This is one that might hit people a little differently, even if you have like one takeaway from it, right? Are you sharing client stories in the book? Yeah.
Yeah. So I share the problem of like
Mhm.
why I think we have to prioritize. I don't think sexuality should be a luxury. It
Yeah.
should be a necessity. And then I get into the 9 pillars. And in the 9 pillars, I teach you what they are, and then I tell personal stories. I tell client stories, and that with their permission, and changing things. And then I give sex exercises, and then I end it with prompts to ask yourself with it. And then I've added a QR code at the end of each of the pillars, so that you can hear other people telling their story. Because the book is actually based on a course that I've been doing for about 20 years.
Yeah.
And
Let's talk about that.
part of the course is we go through these pillars,
Mhm.
and you write stories. So you write a story of celebration, a story of healing after we've gone through the content and shared it. And I think it's very powerful to hear other people's stories, because when people risk take, and a lot of times if you do this in a group, all it takes is one person to say the hard thing, and then other people feel like they can say it as well. And so I went first, and I did this kind of one-sided vulnerability, which is really difficult to do. I had to really sit down. I had a running document as I was writing the content of the book of all the stories I was sharing about myself, and thought, okay, so this is what people who don't know me are going to know about me without us being in a relationship. And I was like, am I okay with this? And some days I was like, absolutely. Other days I was like, what are you doing? And, you know, and I was like, oh, my poor children are going to read this. I was like, my mom's going to be the first one to read this. And then I thought, people don't have to earn my vulnerability with this subject matter right now, and I need to go first so that other people will have the bravery. And then I also thought it'd be helpful for them to, because as much as I tried to be as inclusive and diverse in the stories and the perspectives, I can't capture everything, but I can do more. And I also think it's really powerful to hear it. So I'm very excited to see how people interact with the QR code in the book, and we'll see if people go from the chapter to listen to the audio messages from those who have already done the questions.
That's a
before
great
them.
idea. So the QR code will take people to personal journeys, personal stories of those who have worked with you, have worked through the 9 pillars. And like you said, it reminds us that we're not alone.
Yes.
Everybody's story is different in their own
Hmm.
right, but when we come down to it, we're all just walking each other home in some way or another, right?
Hmm. Oh,
Yeah.
it's beautifully
I
said.
love that.
Yeah.
I did not make
Hmm.
that up. Those are not
It's
my
beautiful.
words.
Well, well
That's
timed. Well
either
timed.
right. I love using that. I think it actually comes from Ram Dass, the great spiritual leader, who I think originally came from Rumi. So it goes way back, and I do want to credit, but I do use it because it really is a reminder that we're never on this journey walking alone, and we're all walking towards something greater, higher knowledge. We want to existential, whatever it might be for each person. But when we realize that we're not in it alone, it makes it a little easier, doesn't it?
It does. It does.